So, good afternoon to you all. Welcome to our first JNForever for 2022. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work. We respect elders past, present, and emerging, and their continuing connection to land and water. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Chait, Legacy Manager for JNF Victoria. Leaving a bequest, no matter the size, is an extremely meaningful and benevolent act that will forever be your contribution to Israel and your family in perpetuity. Please call me, feel free to call me for a confidential conversation to discuss the different options available. So, I know you can't answer, but I just want to know how everybody's been. And I hope that you all managed to have a very well-earned break and that you're starting this year with optimism and new energy. I was lucky or brave enough to have gone to Israel to visit my son. It is always the best place to be. And Hashem truly looked after me as I tested positive for COVID the day I got home. So that was amazing. I only wish one of the side effects was weight loss and becoming taller, but I didn't get either. So welcome everyone. We started the year on Zoom, but we are headed back to the Caulfield Pavilion from March onwards. I'll give you more details later. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our guest speaker, none other than David Southwick MP. He needs little introduction, but here goes. David Southwick is the member for Caulfield and the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party in Victoria. He has held several parliamentary positions. In 2013, he was appointed as the Parliamentary Secretary for Police and Emergency Services. In 2014, the Shadow Minister for Innovation, Energy and Resources and Renewables. In 2018, Shadow Minister for Police, Community Safety and Corrections. David was elected as the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party in Victoria in September 2021 and was appointed as the Shadow Minister for Jobs and Employment, Shadow for Events Industry, Business Recovery, CBD Recovery, Shadow Minister for Small Business, and for business precincts. He has an extensive background in innovation, entrepreneurship, and small business. And David continues his commitment to young people and various local charities. He holds a Bachelor of Business from Victoria University, and in his spare time, which I don't know where he finds the spare time, he enjoys keeping fit, following the St Kilda Saints, and spending time with his family. So without further ado, over to David.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for that kind introduction. And hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. It would be better to be with you in person, and I can't wait to be back, and we'll do it again when we're able to meet face-to-face at Caulfield Pavilion or wherever you will be meeting. I know that the conversation today is all politics is local, and I'm going to talk a bit about that shortly. Jackie mentioned about my elevation to the deputy leader role, and it's a real privilege to do that. One of the benefits of being the deputy leader, other than having twice the amount of work for no additional pay and no more staff, so you've just got to manage and get through. But the biggest benefit is you actually get to pick your own portfolios. And although I've enjoyed police and energy and resources and innovation and all the portfolios I had the opportunity to work with, I wanted to do something in the business area, particularly my background, and obviously, and also in the events sector, running an events business. So small business and jobs and business and all those economics and business portfolios are something that is very near and dear to my heart. And it's good for a good Jewish boy to be having those portfolios, because I think we've got a bit of a cop when it comes to that kind of thing. And I think that's really important in terms of running the state. And the one thing that I think is really, there's a lot of things that's going to be really important for the future of Victoria going forward for the next 20, 30 years and beyond. And that is to restore Victoria to where it used to be, the best place to live, to make Victoria #1 again. And I really mean that. We were in Melbourne, we were the most livable city for so many years. And sometimes when you take that for granted, that you lose it. And I think that's really interesting for us, is because it provides a really important challenge to say, how can we get that back? How can we get our events capital in the fact that we've run so many great major events, and yet in the last 2 years, We know the issues we had with the Australian Open. We haven't been able to run the Grand Prix for 2 years running. The AFL Grand Final, which is our great game of football in Melbourne, the last 2 grand finals have been played interstate, not here in Melbourne. And I know we've been in lockdown and we've had the pandemic and everything else, but it's a real shame that we haven't been able to really build on our international reputation. And so that's going to be really important in terms of bringing tourism back and bringing investment and people to come here and invest in our great state and to build our reputation. And I just came from a business lunch with Vecchi, the Employment Chamber. And one of the things that Chris Lucas said, who runs a number of successful restaurants, is he said that he used to go to trade fairs and in the UK and in Ireland and other places to recruit people that were coming on backpacking holidays to come and work in some of his restaurants, because he literally employs thousands of people in the hospitality space. And a couple of years ago, he would have 100, 150 applications. The last one, which he just returned from 2 weeks ago, he had 5. And people just don't want to come here. People have got real fear of another lockdown, of more restrictions. They don't want to do a backpacker working holiday. And unfortunately, the reputation has been lost. And I know that that's a key component of our livability status. Is people come here, they tour, they want to come back, and they tell everybody when they travel to Melbourne and Victoria just what a wonderful place it is. So I would say, as a starting point, we have a lot of work to do, but Melbourne, Victoria is the best place in the world. We all know that. We love it. That's why we're all here. We're proud in terms of so many things that we have to offer, in terms of whether it's multiculturalism, the way we embrace people from different backgrounds, even the way our Jewish community has been embraced and celebrated in so many different ways from all governments, from all sides of government. I think that's really, really important to say that, you know, it is great that we can live and proudly, and I say that all the time, that whether we have a new Torah that we parade in the streets of Caulfield or St Kilda or whatever, and we don't have to worry about someone coming and a threat. The fact that we can have Simchat Torah and Sukkot and all of the events that we have, Hanukkah in the park and all that kind of thing. And again, we can do that throughout really having to worry, although obviously we are getting a little bit more increase from extremists, but they're extremists, they're not the majority. And what I absolutely love about Caulfield and our community and our state is we can go up during Hanukkah and we could light the Hanukkah in Caulfield Park, and we can have a carnival, and we can have thousands of Jews, excluding the pandemic, all in Caulfield Park. But we can also have thousands of people outside of the Jewish community that are coming and learning and celebrating with us. And that's the wonderful thing, is we get to share our religion, we get to share our faith and our background, and we're not exclusive when it comes to that. We're very inclusive in sharing. I think that's really, really important. And the final thing that I will say about our community is we are held in very, very high esteem, again, in political circles. Josh Frydenberg has done a fantastic job at the federal sphere. And, you know, obviously you've got Josh Burns there as well at the state level. You know, there's been obviously me, but Marsha Thompson, who was there before me, Paul Hamer, which is my co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Israel. But, you know, from all walks of life, we really, really have worked very strong on whether it's taking politicians to Israel on familiarization exchanges, again, sharing. I started something 10 years ago when I became the politician, the MP for Caulfield, and that was to bring politicians, state, federal and local, for a familiarization tour of Caulfield and to meet the Jewish community. And we've been doing it nearly every year. And so we go and my colleagues, they meet Jewish Care, they go to a synagogue, they go to Beth Weitzman, they meet organizations like JNF. They have a full tour of what our community, a full immersion day. And we finish off with a mock Shabbat. And we give them, in many occasions, we've given them a challah to go home with, and that's their experience. And that kind of stuff has been really, really important. And I think, I think that's something that I'm really proud of, is that I've really worked hard on politicians from all sides outside of our community so they can embrace our community and learn from our community. And many of those politicians have come back and said, we love what you're doing with your elderly, with Jewish care or whatever. Can you help us introduce us for the Muslim community or for the Indian community or for the Chinese community in their electorates? So I think, if you really think about this, how do we combat anti-Semitism? How do we combat hate? Is we actually put ourselves out there. We can run things really well as a Jewish community. We do run things very well. We have more presidents than we have people. Everybody's running and organizing things. That's fantastic. But the upside of that is we can actually help others, particularly emerging communities, the African community. A lot of them are really, really struggling to run their own organizations, their own peak bodies. And there's been a lot of work done already around that multi-faith space, but we could do a lot more in actually teaching those new communities as they come to Australia. And so rather than having a negative perception because somebody has said that, Jews are this, Jews are that, we actually give them a positive perception because they've met a Jew and they know what we're like, and they know that we embrace people, we help people, and that changes things altogether. I see it all the time in my job, all the time, where because my name isn't Sorokovich as to what it used to be, but, our name was changed to Southwick. It's a very Anglo name. So a lot of people, don't know I'm Jewish, and quite often you'll hear just a disparaging remark every now and again, and not in a bad way, but when you pick it up and you explain to someone, well, I'm Jewish, and actually it's not. Jews are not like that. And so there's a lot we can do. But that's not what my topic was going to be about. My topic was going to be about all politics is local. And I'll talk for 5 or 10 minutes and really, more importantly, open up for questions. But I wanted to say that we've all been through a really tough time over the last few years, and the pandemic has been tough on all of us. And, thank you to organisations like JNF that has kept us connected. And that's really, really important, because without that, we would all be very, very lonely. And although we want to meet in person, even the fact that we've had these Zoom calls have been really, really important. But I want to take you back in terms of a politician's life 2 years ago during the pandemic, and it really hones in about, all politics is local, because yes, I'm in Parliament now, and we have obviously debates in Parliament, we have policy, we do lots of things at the big scale. But at the end of the day, if you're not there for your community, if you're not there for your constituents, you don't come here. Even John Howard lost his seat against Kevin Rudd as a Prime Minister. He lost the election, but he also lost his seat. You can't be a Prime Minister, you can't be a Premier, you can't be a Minister unless you look after your community first and foremost. And that's really important to remember. So whenever anyone says to you, it's great that somebody does everything, a lot of people thank me, and I really take every bit of thanks, but that's my job. My job and my focus is to my community. And if I'm not looking after my community, I'm not doing my job. And that applies to every politician. So if anyone's not helping you, at whether it's a local councillor, a federal member or a state member, you tell them that you're there because of you. You put us in and you vote us out. It's very important to remember. But during the election, during the pandemic, we were inundated. And I think Jane Rapke's on the call, which works tirelessly in my office, and she's unbelievable. She's the best support that I could ever have. But our calls, you might get 10 or 20 calls a day and a whole lot of emails. It went tenfold. So all of a sudden, when we went into lockdown, we got our phones rung off the hook. What about if I'm this kind of business? Can I go to work? I've got somebody from overseas. How can I get them here? I've got a funeral. How do I organise it? I've got a wedding coming up. Can I still do the wedding? All these people were ringing us for answers. And the problem was that we didn't have any more answers than what the people that were ringing us. So all we could do was try and find the information. So we were scouring through, trying to get onto government ministers and people just to trying to help. And then on a Friday night, about a week after the lockdowns, or a few days after lockdowns, on the Friday night at 5 p.m, just after 5 p.m, we got a note from the Speaker of the Parliament saying, from now on in, all politicians are not considered essential workers, and you can't work from your office anymore. So don't come to work on Monday. And I was at work, and Jane and a few others were at work, and I was furious. I said, hang on, how am I going to do this job with my mobile phone from home when the phone's running off the hook? And I think at the time we were dealing with somebody that her mother was dying of cancer, and we were trying to get her for a tour of the Melbourne Museum before her mother passed away, and it was the aquarium. It was a dying wish from a child and mother. We were dealing with the most horrible things, and I had people waiting on a call. I was doing stuff on two phones and my mobile phone, and I just said to Jane, "We're not going home. No way am I going home. Our job is to be here." So I contacted a few of my colleagues and I said, we've got to push back on this. So we all wrote an email to the Speaker and said, provide us the health advice that says we can't work from our office and do our job. Otherwise, we'll all be back on Monday morning. And we had about 20 MPs all provide that advice, or send that email. And within an hour, we got an email back and it said, you can work from your office. So it was really, it was interesting how things changed pretty quickly, but it was a turning point, because from that moment onwards, our office was inundated for months. And we would come in from 8 o'clock in the morning, and look, in fairness to my staff, I sent my staff to work from home, but I felt I had to be there, and I had a casual person that was helping me answer the phones. And then our staff were triaging things from home. So we did things as safe as possible. And all I was sitting in an office pretty much by myself, and I had somebody in a separate office out the back, and they were answering the phones, and we were trying to cope the best we could. But it was the hardest period in this job, because most people that were ringing us were traumatized, and it started from 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, each and every day. And sometimes you won and sometimes you lost. Sometimes you couldn't bring people back from overseas that wanted to do a funeral. Some people, you couldn't have a funeral. It was the most horrible, horrible, horrible times. And I felt for every single one that we had to deal with. And sometimes you win. And it was really, you couldn't make rhyme or reason, whether you get a response, whether you wouldn't get a response. And the couple of learnings for me was just forget about the government. And I'm not going to criticize the government, forget that, but forget about the government. But the positive for me was how strong the community were, because the community, and Jewish community won, but not even just the Jewish community. The Sikhs, in the housing commissions in North Melbourne and Flemington, where those people were locked in their commission flats for 2 weeks and they had no notice. They literally found out on the television that they couldn't come out of, they were in isolation for 14 days. And these were people in housing commissions. The Sikhs came down and the volunteers all did stuff, and the Sikhs served food for 2 weeks to the volunteers. They just organised themselves and did it. So there was so much that was done. Locally, I had calls from a guy that happened to have a whole lot of masks, and he said, do you want some, when the mask stuff and the sanitizers came in, and he said, would you like some mask donations? And I said, that would be terrific. We got volunteers in, we packed off masks. I then sent them out to volunteers that would pick them up in their cars at my office, and we dropped them off outside people's doors so that when they could go to the supermarket, they had a mask, because they didn't have masks and they didn't have sanitizers. So we did that for hundreds of people in the electorate. We dropped off food parcels. We worked with volunteers locally to get stuff to people, and our community especially just stood up, and people did whatever they possibly did. And it was amazing. It really was. And there was a group that I visited yesterday, Bayside Relief, and I gave them an award for the work that they do. and they were packing food parcels and stuff for kids and a whole range of things. So many community organisations stood up. Probably, and I'll fast forward because there was a lot of things that happened during that time. Probably the most heartwarming thing that we did locally was when kids were being homeschooled, and this only happened about 6 months ago, and there was this ongoing issues around mental health of kids and families that couldn't go to school. I said to Jane, you know what, we've got to do something for these kids. And I said, why don't we contact a couple of toy shops and see if we can get some toys and set up our office as a toy shop? Bit crazy idea. So I contacted some toy retailers, and next minute, the front of our office became a toy shop. We had toys, people would send an email, and then they would bring their kids, they'd come past, they'd click and collect, and they would pick a toy of their choice. And it was the best thing for us. It put the best smile on our face to see a mum, a dad bring their child in. And for that moment, the kid felt like they were living normally, that they could effectively visit a toy shop, be it their local member of parliament, pick up a toy and go home again and sit at home with their kids. And so I suppose the thing for me is during these times, it's been really, really tough for all of us, but you've got to be flexible, you've got to work. And I'm just giving you some highlights for me, but I think, you know, we're very, very lucky to be living where we are. Our community and our community organisations are fantastic. I know particularly during the issues of the outbreaks, the engagement party, which we all read about, unfortunately, and some of the schools that couldn't meet during their times. And, you know, it's very hard to explain to people that aren't Orthodox that, you know, the shul is everything for so many of those community members, and to not go to shul or do anything is very, very hard. And I know we had the Satmar group that were breaking all the rules, but there were a lot of other people that couldn't go to shul and do things, and it was a difficult time for everybody. There were moments, particularly when we had the outbreaks in our community, that I got on and we did stuff in a bipartisan way with Josh Burns, and I did some stuff, and every day we met with the whole health team of the government, and we had members of the community, including CSG and JCCV, working to try and get answers. And we did things like, even in the Adus school, we set up a testing centre in the Adus school. So every morning we could get the Adus community go in and get tested. We set up additional vaccination hubs in the local community, and we set something up in St Kilda as well, so people can go and get vaccinated. So there were things that we were able to do in a bipartisan manner to get the stuff done. And I saw a real mess in the way things were working and not working. And there were times where the government would say to me, right, well, the vaccination centre will open at 9 o'clock, or the testing centre would open at 9 o'clock. And we would put that out on our social media, and it wouldn't open until 11 o'clock, and people were angry and everything else. So there are a lot of things that didn't work the way that they should have. But at the end of the day, that time wasn't for criticism. It was for just getting things done and working together. And that was really, really important. So it's been a tough couple of years. We're now hopefully at the other end of it. We're all about recovering and rebuilding, and that's got to be our focus. And I want to finish where I started by saying that I am really excited. I think that we have a really good opportunity to reposition ourselves. We've got to be able to get confidence in living our lives. We've got to be able to learn to live with the virus in whatever that may morph itself into going future. Of course, we've got to be safe. Of course, we've got to be safe. Of course, we've got to think differently about how we engage with people. Maybe we might not hug everybody for a long while, or, you know, maybe we might be a little bit cautious about our hygiene and social distancing. We might have to do all of that. We've got to protect our vulnerable. We've got to do that. But at the same time, we've got to be confident enough to walk our shops, enjoy our lives, see our children and see our grandchildren, and not be locked up anymore. And I think that is really, really important. For me, governments have got to be heard less and seen less, and things have to operate more smoothly. And that's going to be my focus, is to ensure we can get going again, re-establish ourselves, get businesses and jobs and shops open again, and get communities going again. And that's really going to be my focus. So I'll finish there, and happy to take any questions.
I would just like to ask something, if I may, probably what the group may want to know, which is, you know, as also being as from a legal background myself, I think this, for me, or probably a lot of people, the scariest part was the ability for the government, or particularly our Premier, to make these very, very, very harsh rules, and you know, these lockdowns that went on and on and on. And I think maybe a question probably from everyone's perspective is there a chance that that could ever happen again? Or are we done and dusted with those really, really harsh and imposing restrictions on our lives and those lockdowns?
Yeah, so Jackie, unfortunately, in many ways they're worse, because the government's passed new powers before the Parliament that effectively creates the opportunity for the government to step in and do a whole lot of things on the potential of an outbreak happening again. So let's say, for argument's sake, that in Africa there is a strain of a disease happening and the government's worried that it might come here. Then lockdowns can be issued. They can potentially, if they think that, and they'd have to have good grounds, but let's just say that the Jewish community has the ability of catching this more than anybody else. They can quarantine off certain sectors, and they have arrest powers in this new legislation. Now, we got a number of amendments in that legislation, but it wasn't quite enough, and there is some oversight, but not quite enough. It'll be one of the first things that we would repeal should we be in government. We have state of emergency powers, and they're important. So where there is a state of emergency, the Parliament should declare that, and every 30 days, it should go back to the Parliament and be renewed. And the ability of that is you can debate it, you can talk about it, and it doesn't give the power to one person. But the issue now is effectively the chief health minister, or the health minister, has those powers to do it without any parliamentary, doesn't have to come to Parliament to pass it. So the health minister could do it on their own accord.
Wow. Okay. Anybody else would anyone else like to ask a question? Just, you can unmute yourself, as I can't see everybody. Anybody else? Yes, Jack.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Yes. Look, just a general comment, which you might be able to throw some light on. What you were doing over the last 2 years, in my opinion, I think are things that local councils should be doing as a matter of principle. It appears that over the years, local councils have become much more of a government instrumentality, and they try to act as a small part of state government rather than working as a local council. I think local councils need to be changed slightly, and I'm wondering whether you've got any comments to make in terms of how local councils can become more efficient and work towards the amenity of the people in the area rather than act as a sort of government instrumentality.
That is a really, really good question, Jack. The first thing that I would say is that local governments become too politicised. So there should be no politics in local government. And my father was actually a councillor out in Werribee. He had a factory out in Werribee. I used to go there with him as a kid. And he was of Liberal background, but he was just a person of community. And he never ever took his politics into his council. And it would all be that's where I learnt my trade from my dad. And the whole bit about, you know, whether it would be going to a childcare centre. You know, he used to, as a Jewish man, he used to dress up as Father Christmas for the childcare centre and hand out presents. You know, like at one stage as a Jewish boy going to Mount Scopus, he was double booked, and he said, "Son, I need you to play Santa at a childcare centre." And I'm like, "But Dad, I don't know the songs or anything like that." So I had to go there and pretend I knew Jingle Bells, you know, like, and hand out Christmas presents. I mean, really. But that was my dad, and that was about being a councillor. The council now are political training grounds for these politicians. They shouldn't be. You know, a lot of people say, why doesn't the Liberal Party, because we don't endorse people for local council, and people often say to me, why don't you endorse people for council as Liberals? And we deliberately don't do that because we don't want politics in local governments. Whereas Labor and the Greens actually run Labor councillors and Green councillors. So you vote for a Labor or a Greens councillor. And so everything that they do is not about local, but it's about politics. I'll give you a classic case. Our Greens councillor, which I won't mention his name, but you can work it out, in Glen Ira, the federal government had money available to be able to build car parking at various train stations, car parking, so people didn't have to drive into the city, but they could park and catch the train. Now, you would think the Greens would support that in terms of less people in cars, more people using public transport. He wanted the council to not take the money to build the car park at Elstonwick Station. He said, why should we shouldn't be taking that money, because it was a political thing that the federal government used to try and win the last election. Well, surprise, surprise, governments and oppositions make promises to win elections. That's what we do. I mean, there's no surprise in that. And he's saying, well, we shouldn't take the money. So he was campaigning to say to the council, let's not take the money. It would cost the council nothing. And we were going to be denied a car park at Elstonwick Station where you could use for the trains and you could use it to shop at Elstonwick. He didn't want any of that. And that was purely political because he didn't want money from the federal government because he was a Green. So we don't need that stuff. That's crazy. You know, the bike path stuff that's going on at the moment in Inkerman Road, that's crazy. What is the local council spending ratepayers' money on a feasibility study that they've got no money to build the bike path anyway? The state government's got the money, and the state government said, we're not going to give you any money. We're certainly not going to give them any money for the bike path. So you've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being spent on a bike path that nobody wants for a feasibility study. They'll rack up $1 million on a feasibility study and they won't build anything for probably never to be done. And that's your money that you're spending on your rates every week, which people are already struggling. So, Jack, you've got me pretty angry about that. I absolutely agree with you. Council should be doing what they do best. Get some parks, some greenery, make sure our rubbish is collected. They can't even do that properly. Now our rubbish, we get that. We've got to, we only get a fortnight collection on our rubbish because, like we've got rats in the street because, we're storing our rubbish and we can't put it out every week. It's crazy. Seriously, they should do their job.
I would agree with that. Nanelle.
Hello. My question about, I would like you to clarify, David, on a special issue. Since it's already established that vaccinated and unvaccinated can get virus and spread the virus similar at certain degree the same way. If you win an election, will you abolish all sort of discrimination, like passports, mandates, jab for job, and so on? Just all sort of discrimination. Will your government do that?
You're not holding back with an easy question, are you?
No.
And I love your artwork on the wall. That's beautiful, Nanelle. Very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, so our position is pretty clear on this. We were very, very strong on the 2-dose, and people getting their ticks and all the rest of it to get to a point where we get the majority of people vaccinated. So ultimately we could open things up, and that was according to National Cabinet guidelines. We got to 95%. At 95%, everything was meant to open up, and we had herd immunity and everything going. And we believe, other than the essential workers like healthcare workers and essential workers, there shouldn't be mandates for people going forward. We can't have a 2-tier economy. You can't exclude people from society. You can't have a situation where you take people's tick away from them. I think that's going to be very dangerous. Now that's the perspective now. I will say this though to you, is we do need to rely on and I say on real health advice, not what a politician might say, but we do need to rely on what might happen in the future if, for whatever argument's sake, things change. And I think the big thing about our vaccination was good in terms of people did follow and we did get to a point, but the government haven't responded. The government hasn't opened things up. The government hasn't taken restrictions off. I think ultimately we should be able to we're at a point now where we should be able to open up and get on with our lives. And all things considered, I wouldn't be excluding people. I wouldn't be running a two-tiered economy. I don't think I've been arguing against QR codes, the necessity of QR codes and all of that for a long time now, because it's not even being used. So the government's collecting information, they're not even using that information. And ultimately, I think everybody should be treated fairly. So that's my view.
Thank you.
Leah.
Hi. This might not be under your jurisdiction, but as Deputy Premier of the Opposition, I received a letter recently from Elwood Children's Centre, which is at the bottom of my street. And apart from that particular one, two other centres, one in Balaclava and St Kilda, are all being closed by the council, and they want to sell the property on Tennyson Street. It doesn't impact on me, I don't have children of that age, but on three different centres, it must impact on a lot of people in the area. And I wondered if if there's anything that you knew about it.
Yeah, these are great questions. And Leah, I have been very active with the people, the parents that run those, that will not run them, but are part of those centres. And I appeared at the rally they had a week or two ago, and I've been writing to both the council and the state government. This is a classic case where people pass the buck. So the council say, well, we haven't really got the money to run the centres, and the council run centres and they're run down. And then you had the state government turn up at the rally and say, isn't this wonderful? Martin Foley turned up and said, save the childcare centres. At the end of the day, for those centres to survive, the state government needs to put their hand in their pocket and actually fund the upgrade, because a lot of them are pretty run down and they don't need millions and millions of dollars, but they need some basic upgrades, and the government's just got to fund them. So I'll be putting pressure on the government to fund them so they stay open. I think childcare is absolutely crucial. They are important to our community, and we shouldn't be closing them. We should be opening new ones, not closing them. So yeah, it's a really, really good point, and I am working with those families.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Oh, what I want to say is just going to be facetious. What do we do about all these horrible people in our council? How do we get rid of them, and how do we get a say in how things should be done? What do we do to combat all this?
Lily, we've got to get good people just to put their hand up and stand. Look, I've got to say, we can't tar them all with the same brush. There are some really, really good councillors that are doing a great job. And I think the CEO is a very, very good CEO, Rebecca McKenzie. I get along very, very well with her. I have a lot of regular meetings with her. Marcus Pearl, who's the new mayor of Port Phillip, he's a great mayor, and he's not political at all. And yeah, I just think you've got to, when it comes to election time, we've got to really make sure we've got good people from real experience. I think it's the best place. I mean, most of you know Sam Parasol. Sam, who's a councillor, put his hand up. They're the type of people that we need to be councillors, because Sam's got no vested interest other than looking after the community. I mean, he's a community person. He spent his life with Maccabi and other things helping community. That's great. That's a great, he's not looking for a career in politics. He just wants to help people. So that, I think that's what we've got to really think about. And anyone that runs the council, I think we should ask them, what's your intentions? What are you doing this for? and make sure that their intentions are right.
Well, send us a list of the good people so we know who to
Yeah,
vote.
I will. And I look, I'm really careful about what I do. I try. So a lot of people were contacting me, and I want to do the right thing. So yeah, sometimes sometimes I'm a little bit too proper in all of this stuff. Maybe I should be a bit more, here's who you should vote for. I don't know.
Ma, why don't you stand? Come on, something to
Can't
do.
do two jobs.
Jackie, I'm so short that when I stand, you tell me to stand up instead of sitting.
Mute.
Oh, Lily, yeah, let's get Lily up.
Anyone else? I think we have time for, let's have one more question if David's okay with that.
Sure.
Anybody else? I see most people haven't got their...
David, sorry, Shirley here.
Hi, Shirley.
Hello, Shirley.
Sorry, trying.
Here we go. There
Yeah.
she is. Hello.
Okay, I'm here. David, you're absolutely right. Many people are involved. They want things to improve. They want to... I don't get involved with the council, going to meetings or anything like that, but many people I know are talking about the money that is spent in the area, in the Caulfield area. Money being thrown out there, whether it be, as at the end of our street, that they have a new supposedly park or green area, had to pay a fortune, couple of million, I suppose, for a property, pull it down, set up a green area, trees, a couple of barbecues, but we're not far away from Hawthorne Road where we can utilise those items. We drive down certain streets, there are potholes, areas, streets that need to be improved and covered, bitumen and whatever. We have play centres, we have kindergartens that are closing down, having issues, and the council buying the property. You talk about the feasibility study in regard to the bike track. Lots and lots of people are making comments, but they're not being heard in the right places. Even a person who was working in one of those parks or on the road, well, you need to get to your council. There's money being wasted or spent. And the question is, yes, you're right, we have to turn up to those meetings and make ourselves heard, but in what numbers to stop this sort of waste of money, because it can be utilised by so many groups of people, communities, fixing up areas that a lot of us believe need to be improved. How do you do it?
So the other trigger, which we haven't been talking about, Shirley, is that the state government have a number of levers that they could be pulling. And we do have an election, obviously, in November, but we've got a local government minister. These councils are funded by state government in terms of the money that they then spend. So there is absolutely things that the state government can be doing to refocus the work that councils do away from all of this wasted stuff into things that count. And the other thing that I would say about that, Shirley, which I'm big on, is we should have a complete restructure of councils and the way that they operate, a complete overhaul. We need to refocus them on the important things that they do. I think, again, we're overgoverned. There is a lot of things that you could take away from what they do and get them refocused. And I'll be very, very fair, because I am fair, is that the current government, the Labor government, did do a reasonable job of rate capping. So rate capping meant that the council couldn't escalate your rates because they wanted to do some stuff. The rates could only be raised to certain levels. That's a start. That's a start. But I think what we need to do is completely re-engineer things so they're funded very much based to their needs, and they should be reporting like any other department and be able to justify what they're spending their money on. And if they're spending their money on the wrong things, then their budget should be readjusted accordingly. We shouldn't be wasting it on things that are just irrelevant. I mean, really, This is there are more dire things that the council should be focused on rather than doing feasibility studies on things that no one wants. And so that's what I would be doing. And I think ask those questions coming up to the election. If you're in my area, I'm told you what I'm going to do. But if you're not in my area, ask the candidates who will be running, what are you going to do to make sure that local councils are more accountable? The state government have levers. We can do things. We can change things. We can't let councils get away with what they've been doing. They've been getting away with murder. They shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I would like to Jack, are you able to do the vote of thanks, please? Because yes, you know how to do these things. No, I know Bella really wanted to be here, David, because I know she's a personal friend. She may be somewhere here on her phone, but she had to go and collect the grandchildren at the last minute. That's what a lot of the grandparents are doing. So I'm going to call upon my co-chair, Jack Kagan, to do the vote of thanks, and then we will end off. Thanks, Jack. On the spot.
Well, thank you so much for the short notice. It's been a really inspiring discussion, and it's I know it's been extremely difficult for you and all the other politicians over the last 12 months, 2 years, and we're very grateful that people like you are there in the society and are helping us with all the things that we need. And I think, as you've pointed out today, it's vital that if we have a problem, if we have something to talk about, that we need to get out there and take some responsibility and go and talk to the people like yourselves who can point us in the right direction. You've been a real inspiration, and I think on behalf of everybody that's here listening, we're very happy that you're in politics, looking after not only the things that we need, but the Jewish things that we need. And thank you so much for taking up the time to address us. We're very grateful.
Pleasure, Jack.
Well
thank
done,
you.
Jack.
And
So thanks
you,
again. Thank you so much once again. And, I like to remind everybody that the people that come and speak to us, like David, you can hear what he has to do in a day, in a week, in a month, extremely, extremely busy. And yet he finds the time to come and talk to us, and it's, voluntary. And I really, really thank you and appreciate all that you do, as Jack said, for us as a community, for everything you're doing to represent. And thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah.
Next month, we will be back at the Caulfield Pavilion. We have finally got Peter Alexander will be joining us. I think it's probably the 8th time we've scheduled the same event. But please, God, this will happen. And I look forward to seeing you all in person. And David, if you have time, you are very welcome to join us anytime. We get lovely tea.
I look forward to it. I'll be there at some point.
So thank you all once again, and we will see you at the beginning of March.
Thank you, everyone.